let's imagine that another funder has decided not to fund a project, the project that you are under consideration, and that comes up at the site visit. What does that mean to you, and what does the agency do when that comes up? Anybody want to start with that one?
It can raise flags. Again, it probably isn't always the case where it would kill the request or kill the conversation, but there are going to be some questions that follow. And those are both for the foundation's benefit, but also the agency, because maybe if X Foundation has pulled out and isn't interested, we can help the organization think of another funder that may be appropriate for that ask. Sometimes, especially for instance, the O'Neill Foundation, we only have 3 site goals a year, when many of our colleagues have 4, if not even rolling due dates. So there's always opportunities for continued conversations with other funders, but make sure that that information is shared, because too, like Cecilia was saying, I've run into situations where the funders do talk, and X Foundation will be mentioned in a conversation with the organization, and then we'll see each other at Starbucks, and we say, oh, do you like that project that so-and-so is bringing to us? And they have no idea what we're talking about. So don't think that the foundation professionals aren't in communications and aren't talking about these things, because we do, and they do come up frequently.
And one other thing I would add about the fact that we talk to one another, we're not just like saying, oh, don't fund so-and-so because they suck. I mean, it's not just like gossip conversation, but it's also, like if I have a really great project and I say, we can only do $50,000 in our budget, but, I think it would be really, really great if you would also consider this because they're doing great work. I mean, I'm going to a meeting on Monday morning where one of our colleagues said, this is a project and they're having trouble with sustainability. I want to bring a variety of funders in to talk about how we can together support this program. So we talk about a variety of things. It's not like, we're just trying to compare lists of organizations or projects not to fund. We're really just trying to help each other do the very hard work about thinking about what's the best investment. And just because one foundation doesn't support your work doesn't always mean that it's not a match for us, because we do have different missions and we have different ways of approaching our work. So sometimes something is less of a fit for us, but like I know that O'Neill is all about capacity building, and so it may be a win for them in a way that it wasn't for us. So again, it's helpful for us to know where you are with other funders, but it's not necessarily going to take you off of our list.
And I would say that it really depends on the request, because we know that you all come to all of us for sustainability of ongoing programs. So the fact that this year, St. Luke said it doesn't make sense or we have to take a pass isn't going to impact us. When it does make a difference, and when I will personally reach out to the other funders is, and the best example I can give is there's a nonprofit currently putting together a very significant business plan as to their sustainability and some services that they want to start providing. Well, they've targeted ourselves and 2 other foundations as sort of the foundations that they want to help support this initially and sustain it until it can become self-sustaining. We were the first ones to take a look at it, and we made a decision to pass for various reasons, and then reached out to the other 2 who actually called and said, why did you do this? So what's nice about it is we're actually now working together on a plan to help this organization get the plan to the point where it's either going to be something that makes sense or doesn't. And so it brought the 3 foundations together. So we're working in tandem for this because it's such a unique, special project. So in cases like that, it makes a lot of sense for us to talk to each other. And quite frankly, it worked better because through this process, this organization determined that because of the additional timing it was taking to put together the plan, they needed some bridge funding, and 2 of the 3 foundations said, okay, we'll go ahead and do that. That probably wouldn't have happened if we hadn't come together and talked. So as LaTida said, I think it's more to your advantage than disadvantage when we really do sit and talk to each other about that. But we respect the fact that we all have very different missions, and very often the decision not to fund is really based on mission fit. I mean, if it's something else that's more significant, like leadership or other things, probably the rest of us already know about that anyway.
And if the foundation's calendars allow, I think that there is room to have multiple foundations present at a site visit if the same request is being shopped to multiple funders. And that saves us time, saves the agency time, and a more candid and thorough conversation can occur with multiple funders in the room we found.
And in Lorain County, there are basically 4 funders. So we always talk, and we actually will get together and share dockets. Okay, everybody bring who's coming to you, who's looking at what. And out of those 4, I know who's usually going to help support the ones that I'm interested in or that I think that my board will be interested in. So I'll say, okay, did they come to you? Okay, well, if not, I'm going to tell them to come to you because I think you're going to be the one that's going to come in and help share this cost so that I don't either have to take it on myself and so we all work together. And we do a lot of site visits where we all say, okay, if you're applying to all of us, then let's just do one. All sit at the table because everybody's going to ask different questions. I'm a program person, so I'm looking more at the program and what you're going to do and how you're going to affect some change. And one of the other program officers, she's a budget person. She's looking at all line item, every budget. I'm going, okay, see, good. I'm glad you do that because you can ask all those questions and I'll just kind of listen. But again, everybody comes to the table with different information or different questions. So joint site visits are great.
Can I ask you what role that technology might have, and is it changing how the way that site visits work, for good or ill?
I think we've seen some organizations use technology in really great ways. So they may show videos or have some short presentation of their work that really helps to encapsulate their organization and its programs. And so that's always great. But we also have some site visits that some of our board members described as being death by PowerPoint. So, we've had just some long, tedious site visits with just, hour of just PowerPoint. And so that's a way in which, sometimes organizations are relying on technology. And, we are at your site because we want to have interaction with you. And so I'd say there are pros and cons.
Because of the many geographies that we do serve, we have turned to Skype and conference calls to do a lot of our site visits. And it can benefit the organization and the conversation as long as the technology works. And my one piece of advice is just get there a little bit early and test out your 800 number, test out the webinar service, whatever you may be using. Because especially at O'Neill, if we're on location in Baltimore, for instance, we're on a very tight schedule and we have back-to-back meetings and we only have that 90 minutes or so to share with that organization before we need to move on to the next agency, and we don't have the time in the schedule to fiddle around with technology that is not working. So get there a little bit early, test it out, and make sure everything is in accordance and as it needs to be.
Yeah, it's funny what you said, LaTida, about the PowerPoint. I mean, sometimes we walked in and we see something set up and I'll just kindly say, we're just here to have a conversation. So we appreciate the fact that you have that if you want to pass out that, but otherwise we just pretty much put a stop to that because unless it's something totally unique, it's just not why we're there and it's not the kind of interaction we want to have. To answer the question a little differently, David, I mean, we are one foundation that at this point still does not do anything with online applications. I know some of my colleagues do. We still have everything that comes in paper and work with paper, and we've talked a little bit about doing that. But quite frankly, with the types of information we ask and stuff, I think at the end we'd end up printing it out and figuring out what it is anyway. So at this point, we're going to be old-fashioned and just have everything be submitted from a paper perspective, because then as I go through it, I sort of pick and choose the kinds of things to get to the trustees, because I can't give them the entire package. They would just groan and probably run screaming. So, we're the kind where you'll submit a paper request and then we'll take it from there. I mean, as simplistic as it sounds, what I have found very helpful is that very often at a site visit there might be something missing or new updated information or outcomes data or other things that they have for us, and just having email and being able to get that information right away subsequent to the site visit and then being able to forward it on to the trustees is very helpful for us, because then they can consider that in their final recommendation and determination, where before that wouldn't have been possible. And sometimes the information that's sent to us post-site visit is some critical information that could make or break their decision as to whether or not there's funding.
And we don't do we're on online. We moved to online grants. And now we also, so what we do is for our committees, I can upload all of that into SharePoint. So they actually, if they want to read the whole grant, it's out there. It used to not be that way. It used to be that I would get the paper and I would just copy what I felt like copying and send it out to them. But this way they have access to everything that came in from the grant. So if they want to take the time to read everything through, then it's out there for them. We actually just now moved to electronic board books, so it's not so much on the side of the nonprofit, but more on our side that we've gone kind of more electronic than paper. And we still have people that print everything out, and that's the way they want to deal with it, that's fine. But now, me and my one-person staff don't have to take the time to make so many copies and that kind of thing, because you can all get it electronic.
Excellent. I have one more question that I want to ask the panel, but before I do, I just wanted to say that we're going to turn this over to questions from all of you. And for those of you, particularly the ones that are on that side of the room, if you were going to come up and ask a question, we want to do it on the mic here. So if you could walk around and kind of go behind the camera so you don't kill yourself on the wires or wind up unflatteringly on camera or anything like that. So, but you're welcome, if you have a question already in mind, you're welcome to kind of form a line over here if you'd like to do that. And don't be shy. You won't be on camera now, so it's okay. But the last question I have for the panel is, I know we've heard a little bit about the lack of interest in PowerPoint at the moment. Is there one thing that you would warn against, or one thing that you've seen, or maybe two things, that you would say at a site visit, I hope this never happens again. I feel very bad for the place that it did happen to, something like that.
One thing, we do all of our site visits in a week, and so we'll have like 4 site visits a day for a week. And one of the things that always pains me is when organizations just don't prepare for a site visit. Like, my staff and board have walked into site visits and they'll say, "So, LaTida, what do you want to hear?" And nothing pains me more than that, because usually it's a project that I love and I'm excited about sharing with my board, and they haven't prepared one single thing. And we might have just come from a site visit that was just for kind of, in my opinion, a lukewarm project, but we're, considering funding it. And they had, board members who are well briefed, and they have all these materials and a video. And so it just looks as if the other project isn't as significant, or as if they don't have, their act together, as if they don't have a compelling story, because they haven't even bothered to prepare. So, and as a program officer, it really pains me, because when we request a proposal, I'm your advocate to our board, and so I want to present your project in the best possible light that I can. But if you haven't even tried to do that, then it doesn't give me much room to do my job. So I would just say, please, prepare, because again, especially when we're doing back-to-back site visits, it's so glaringly obvious when one organization has done nothing and some other organization may have, a bazillion people there and do a very well orchestrated show. And sometimes it has nothing to do with the project. It's all about the preparation.
And I think that that's a comfort level that maybe they have the comfort level with you, so they're like, okay, well, we don't really need to do anything because LaTida's already behind us. But it's not only LaTida that you have to convince. So you want to make sure that you are prepared, because it's not just going to be LaTida or me doing the site visit. But just make sure that the people that come together are on the same page. I've been, and they were like arguing. And I'm going, if you all are arguing, why am I even in the room? Because the two people that were presenting didn't agree. And so I said, okay, so you should have worked all that out before you ever came to sit down and talk to me, because that's my reason I'm not going to fund you right there, because you're not on the same page. So again, before you come into a site visit, make sure that whoever's coming in with you, you agree, and you're there for the same purpose and not at conflicting reasons.
I would just second what Cecilia said. Make sure that if you're engaging other foundations or other partner agencies or additional board or volunteer committees, that everyone is on that same page, and take the time to have those conversations, because there's nothing worse than seeing another organization at a site visit that is also in this cycle with us, that may be involved in an X project, that knows nothing about the LOI that you have into O'Neill or St. Luke's or whatever the case may be, and don't feel the need to impress the foundations with cakes and bagels and cookies and all that accoutrements. It's nice, but I personally don't like to eat during site visits. A bottle of water or something is nice, but food always seems to sort of get in the way. So I'd rather see you take your time on fleshing out and finalizing those conversations with the right partners and the staff that are at the table than worrying about getting the Starbucks and the cupcakes and whatnot there.
A couple simple requests. One is, please be on time. There's nothing that's, I think, to be quite blunt, more disrespectful, particularly to my trustees, than to have scheduled a time and have all this set up, and then it's 1:00 and your trustees come in at 1:15, 1:20, 1:30, as if it didn't matter that they were late. And not that that would be a reason we wouldn't fund a request, but it just doesn't make a very good impression. So, we're only asking for an hour. It's your hour, and I guess what I would say is make the best use of that. So if everyone could be on time, that's very helpful. And then the other thing is that, the trustees that you do choose to come to your site visit, again, make sure that they are prepared and they're on the same page. And please don't have them be the type of trustee that likes to sit and pontificate and talk about things that don't really matter. Sometimes it's very difficult in a conversation like that to, for the ED to sort of, get them back on track. So it then becomes our responsibility, either mine or one of my trustees, to quote, start to manage another trustee from a grantee. It's just awkward. It's not something we like to do. So it's very important to decide, bring the right trustees along that get it, that understand why they're there, and that are really there to engage in conversation and answer the questions. And then the last thing would be, if you don't know the answer to a question, just say, I don't know. And if your trustee doesn't know the answer to a question, say, I don't know, but please don't try to make stuff up. We've had people just go on, and it's like, you need to stop talking now because it's just getting a little embarrassing. So, we can ask a question and you may not have the answer, and that's okay. I mean, that's perfectly okay.
Well, thank you all for answering the questions. I just wanted to turn this over to all of you. If you would have a question for the panel, feel free. Don't be shy. Okay. Let's come on up to the mic here.
At a site visit, do you prefer conversation, or do you prefer to see a program in action, or maybe a little mix of both?
For me, a mix of both is usually good. If you have a program that's ongoing and we can go in and see a little bit of it, just to kind of see, and then go in and have a conversation about it, that always works well for me.
For O'Neill, we do capacity building projects, so it may benefit us to see the computer bank or a facility that we may be contributing to or just improving, but we don't necessarily need to see the program in action. But yes, if you want to show us the old, archaic computers or laptops or technology you have, please share that with us so that we can compare the new equipment to what you have currently.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I would just say a mix of both, but sometimes if it's, an organization that we're there for the 7th year funding it and it's the same program, we don't need to see it again. We get it, that's why we're there.
And if you are doing tours of the facility, I find that to them at the beginning or the end, especially we have family members dialing in, is a benefit.
Okay.
You just say who you are and what your organization is?
Yes, I'm Julie Fehrenbach, and I'm with the Cleveland Metropolitan School District.
Hi, Mitch Wasserman. I'm representing Transitional Housing. Wanted to address the role of the foundation during the site visit. And I have a comment that I've been in site visits with all of you on several occasions, and I have always found them to be a dialogue, not an inquisition. And I've also found you to be very consultative. We've had site visits actually where we were told, hey, this is a great project. Go get some partners and come back to us. We've had a site visit where someone has said, well, we don't fund that, but we will fund this. Go back and rewrite the proposal and submit it. I've even had one of you say in your acceptance letters, please send your board members to BVU training, which we all knew was necessary, but it was great coming from a third party. So I have found great value in the site visit, but I wanted to get your impression on really, other than gathering information, what you saw as your role in the process.
I guess what I try to do is to make sure that, I'm getting the information that I need, but you're also getting any information from me. But again, finding those partners out there in the community that can work with you and help support what you're doing. I try to always have something in the back of my mind to say, oh, you know what? So-and-so might be able to give you some information about that. People say, I know everybody. They say, you know everybody. And I said, well, I've been doing this for a long time, and so I do. I kind of know different people in different places and know who might be able to be a good partner. And that's kind of how I see my role, is to kind of be a support and a partner in trying to help organizations be the best they can be by connecting with other people in the community. Because those who make the statement that we're the only ones who do this, that's usually not true. There's usually somebody else out there, and you may not know it, but usually if you say, I'm the only one, I can say, well, actually, I know so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so that do that same thing. So you don't make, declarative statements like, we're the only one. So.
I would just add that it is great when organizations really take the site visit as an opportunity to engage in that kind of back and forth dialogue with us. I mean, there are some site visits where organizations really just have their canned sales pitch and they want to make the pitch, and then the time is up and it's time for us to move on to the next site visit. But other times organizations are really interested in saying, this is what we're seeing out in the community. Are you seeing this in similar places? These are some of the challenges that we're facing. How have you approached this in the past, or what do you think other organizations are doing? We love those kinds of site visits because then it really gives us an opportunity to learn and also just share some of the information that we may have gathered from other organizations. So, people often talk about how working with foundations is a lot about relationships. But I also think that it's, you often have the opportunity to build relationships, and it's about taking advantage of opportunities like site visits as a time to do that, to really engage us and to create that kind of back and forth dialogue.
And don't be afraid to ask us questions. If you have questions about our current docket or our trends in our giving, or if we have other organizations that we have funded previously that may have some experience or know of a consultant or an expert that may be able to help, feel free to ask those questions. We're not here to hide that information from you. And you may see me checking my phone. If you have questions from the live stream, don't forget you can email those to us or post them on our Facebook page or the Twitter account for St. Luke's. At SOF Touchdown to get us the questions from the web, so feel free.
And Mitch, to answer your question, I mean, I'll be really honest. For me, it's, first, my primary responsibility is to understand what you're asking for, to make some determination as to whether I think it should be funded. But quite frankly, myself and my trustees will be the first to say that, our knowledge base and our ability to be a good funder is we learn from you. So, when we're at a site visit and you talk about a challenge with the county or something else going on, some level of detail that we have no idea. We're not dealing with it every day, and it really, there's always an opportunity for us to learn, and I always leave knowing so much more than I did before. So, to be honest with you, I don't think we ever communicate that or verbalize that to you, but that happens every day, and I appreciate that from you. The other thing that I'll tell you is, it's not a secret, but again, it's not said very often, is that the only way that we as foundations can do what we are here to do is through identifying the right partners like you that are doing the work. We are not out there fulfilling our mission. Our mission of empowering people to become self-sufficient is fulfilled through you and through identifying those organizations and programs that are truly empowering people to become self-sufficient. So when we're out there talking to you, Mitch, and others, I mean, our job is very much to say, is this one of the organizations that will best help us achieve that mission? Is this an organization that we also may want a more long-term partnership with because the mission fit is such a bullseye? And those are the kinds of things that are sort of going through our heads. So again, partnership is an overused term, but I truly believe that our job and our responsibility is to find the best partners we can in the community, and we like it to be an ongoing dialogue and a carryover from the last time we talked to you.
How you doing? My name is Tony Sessoms. I'm with Phyllis Wheatley Association. I had two quick questions. During the site visit, how important is it to get feedback from beneficiaries? And the second question is, what type of support would a grantee receive after the award?
I don't know that beneficiaries are part of the site visit. Usually, it's the staff or the board, and not necessarily the user or the client. They're not usually involved in the site visits that if you want to send in a document saying that this is what our clients say, I would send that in as part of the proposal, not have it as part of the site visit.
Yeah, I've seen it work really well, but it doesn't always. I mean, because the fact that people are coming through your doors, we know that someone likes you. So, I mean, just having someone say we like them in itself is not always compelling. But at the same time, I've been to some site visits where parents of children who have received a service are really able to speak with specificity and detail about the impact of a program on their lives. And those kinds of stories are extraordinary. And so I've seen it work well, but it's not always mandatory, I'd say.
It may be a good thing to start off with, or maybe wrap up the conversation with, because I'm pretty certain that client and beneficiary probably doesn't want to sit through all the nitty-gritty details and boring stuff that happens at site visits also. So maybe keep that in mind. And answer your question regarding the support after the site visit. At O'Neill, our process is very much an open door process. Once you have that site visit, you normally have about 4 to 6 weeks to complete your full proposal. And if things happen and change in between those times, if you need to pull out of our process because you decided to not pursue a project or you had it funded somewhere else, please share that information with us. And even once the grant is made, I like to hear from our grantees throughout the year as they have questions and hit obstacles and need feedback. So please feel free to keep the communications and the lines of dialogue open with us.
Yeah, and as far as the follow-up after, I mean, we require a 6-month and a 1-year narrative report, but again, as I've said before, I hope there's an ongoing dialogue and that we're talking to each other and you're calling and sharing successes, or if we gave you a challenge grant, you know, I get the phone call saying, we made it, you know, I'm going to send you the letter and we're going to get the money. So, you know, as far as ongoing follow-up, it's more informal, but it's that sort of consultative kinds of things. If you have a challenge, a problem, a question, if the program's going, you know, into left field or something happened totally outside of your control, you call us and say, hey, we have a problem, what can we do? And we'll talk it through and find a solution.
And, you know, adding on to that, I think sometimes the level of engagement that we have with an organization is just based on the number of things that they choose to contact us for. So there's some organizations who will call with everything from, you know, we have a new position. Do you know anyone who'd be a good candidate for this? Or we just wanted to share that with you, to we're looking for a consultant, maybe not even with a project that we're funding, but do you know someone who does good work in this way? And that creates an ongoing dialogue between us and the organization. And so we have a real understanding of what's going on there. And that's something that any organization can ask from us. But unfortunately, only a small number of organizations end up asking us those kinds of questions.
And since we're a corporate funder, we have employees with expertise. And so we ask our grantees, if you need, you know, somebody to come out and help you with your computer networking, or if you need somebody to come and help you with your forecasting, or if you need volunteers to help with the project, let us know. We try to keep our employees involved in the community. It's not just, you know, those of us that work in the foundation, but philanthropy and charity are part of what Nordson was built on. And so we try to make sure that our employees are involved. And so we have people that we place people on boards, and there's a lot of different things. I've had people call and say, you know, somebody called the other day, they need a van. And actually somebody I knew had a van, and so they gave them a van. And so you never know what we might be able to do to support if you don't call and let us know that you're having an issue with something, or maybe you just want somebody to come out. We have our telecommunications guy will go out, look at your phone bills and say, you know what, you could lower this phone bill if you did this, this, and this. And so we have that kind of expertise, and you don't just have, and so I actually have a list of people who have said, you can use my name, I will go out and visit and do whatever you need me to do. So don't only think it's about, okay, I got the money, I can go away now, or
Yeah.
run away, I have it. So
I-
always use us.
And I'd just like to add one other thing, one of the things that some grantees that we have a longer term relationship with do that I just, personally for me, I really enjoy it is they'll they'll call and set up a meeting and they'll come in and it's just really to just sit and talk about what's going on with you and here's what's going on with us, and there's no really set agenda, there's no ask, there's no issue, there's no problem. It's just to say, hey, we're checking in and here's what's going on and thought you'd be interested. And I mean, sometimes those meetings only last 20 minutes, a half hour, but just the fact that they took the time, and it's usually the ED and the development director, or maybe the ED and a trustee who just want to come out. I mean, those to me are lasting. They're lasting in my memory, and I just feel like I know them better. And it's about really working on establishing a relationship. So it sort of goes both ways. We want a relationship with you, but you also have to let us know that you want that relationship with us. And if you do, I know and I'm sure all my colleagues will make ourselves available, whether it be face-to-face or phone or whatever, but those little touches make a huge difference.
And one thing that's interesting is that only a small number of organizations think to do those things.
Right.
But everyone invites us to like their annual event.
Right.
Everyone sends us like their quarterly newsletter.
Right.
And we make 100 grants a year in community grants.
Right.
And so if I went to every single event, that would be the only thing that I did. And if I read every single newsletter, I mean, I get like 400 of them, in the course of a year. And so, it's great that you include us on those things because sometimes we are able to go. But I'd encourage you to think of some of those other things as well, because a lot of times, those 20-minute phone calls, we can do those in a much easier way than we can get to kind of some of the other mass ways of communication that everyone seems to be sending our way.
And send one copy of those, not 19, to the office because we need one.
Hi, Rick LaTida from Vocational Guidance Services. It's good to see you again. I know we've been in a few site visit meetings and also a few proposals before you. The question that I have, there's a couple questions with regard to the site visit, and that is with regard to, I know the time is somewhat limited, and again, there's certain things that you'd like to get and certain things that we'd like to present. Just wondering, is it good to set an agenda or to be able to talk with you about agenda, to be able to set some of those time frames to be able to discuss information? I know that there's a dialogue and discussion that's in there, but sometimes, as you know, those dialogues can get a little bit lengthy, and sometimes you can be able to miss things that you want to be able to say. So my question is, again, would you want the requester to set that agenda, or do you want to set the agenda and or again, doing it together? I just wanted to get your ideas on that. The other thing with regard to a site visit, again, you've received our proposal, you passed it on to the trustees that might be coming on there. Is there anything additional information that you would like to have present when you do come? Any, again, printed or identification information that might be helpful, even some updates on that, that would be also available when you do come in, if you could also answer that. And then the final question is not so much with regard to the site visit, but also trying to get some of the information. I know you do get a lot of requests. Again, you get some requests from me, but I was just wondering, and I know you're not able to answer or respond to all of them. I guess the question that I'm having is, for example, if our request isn't funded, is there a willingness also to kind of share? Maybe the presentation wasn't quite as dynamic, or maybe it didn't fit within the programs. Like I said, I think we all here have gotten responses that very good program, we're just not able to fund it. Sorry about that. And it's just, a few sentences. But I think we'd also appreciate, if possible, some of the feedback on, again, maybe we're not in line with what, again, the mission of that particular foundation, or maybe we misread that. And I was looking at trying to be a little bit better in our next request to you. So if you could respond.
I will provide some guidance as to bullet points and conversation topics that I like to see throughout the agenda. But that creation of the line by line conversation and what that 90 minutes looks like is entirely at the discretion of the organization. In regards to the specific additional materials that we like to see during the conversation, especially I find it helpful if it's a marketing or communications request to have the previous materials and iterations of the pieces that you're looking to improve or change. Again, to sort of have that pace of comparison to compare, contrast where you're going and where you have been. And absolutely, if we are not going to invite the proposal, frequently we will share the specifics and information at the end of the conversation at the actual site visit. And if you would like more information post, feel free to follow up over either email or in person or the phone, and as much of information as we know as to why that request wasn't moved forward, we will gladly share with you and provide insight on how to maybe change that request for the next go around.
In regards to, I'll start with your last question and move up. In regards to a declination, our actual award letter is pretty, it just says we were unable to fund your request, but I usually say please call to discuss, and I am very much, and my board very much wants me to be as transparent and honest with you as we can be, so you will know exactly why you did not get funded, and very often it is strictly just either, scarcity of our resources or the mission fit just wasn't as strong. But if there were other issues that really entered into it around our concern around your financial sustainability or deficit funding or issues with trustees or whatever it may be, we will talk to you about that and talk to you about what the concerns were. They might have not been the singular reason why you were declined, but if they entered into the decision, we'd want you to understand that and then talk about how we can help you work on that going forward. So from our perspective, you may not want to hear what we have to say, but we will say it, and those aren't exactly the most pleasant conversations for me to have, but I think that I think we have a responsibility to tell you why that was. As far as an agenda, we don't set an agenda, but if you, we have many grantees that will come with an agenda, and that's fine, and we'll work with it, but we also, it becomes a conversation. So even though there's an agenda of different people to present, it just we never allow it to be super formal, because at some point we want to engage in conversation and ask questions. So usually it works out fine, and if you come prepared and don't have an agenda at all, we'll make it work, and we'll get the conversation going, and it's usually not a problem. As far as a lot of additional materials, I would say that, personally for me, and I think for my trustees, unless it's really critical, it's hard to be handed something and you can't absorb it in that hour or even respond to it. So I would say I wouldn't find those particularly helpful, but if there's something that you feel we need to have, we can take it with us and look at it. There's usually information we may request that we find that is available that wasn't at the time, and you can send it to us also. But to get a whole bunch of materials and try to absorb it or react to it is very hard. So normally that's not something we would ask for, but if it's pertinent to our ability to look at the request and make decisions, we'll take it, but we'd probably have to look at it later and then react to it later.
As far as additional materials, I wouldn't say materials per se, but we really do appreciate additional information regarding the context of a request. Some organizations are really good at giving us a sense of kind of where they fit in the constellation of health and human service providers in our community. And so they'll share everything from, we've been around for 20 years and we serve 3,000 people, to really giving us a sense of the folks that they serve and the particular services that they provide that are unique and complementary to other programs in our community. I think that that's always really helpful for us to have kind of a picture of where an organization sits. And if you're able to do that, I think it really helps to build a greater appreciation for a project. So we were just on a site visit a couple of months ago for a program that delivers meals to seniors. And so it would have been easy for them to say, we're looking for this money to provide, food for seniors who are homebound. And I mean, that's a story to tell. But they were also able to tell us about how they're one of the few providers in the community that delivers meals on a daily basis, and tell us about the difference that makes for seniors' lives. And they talked about how, the meals that they provide are linked to compliance with medication and ability to stay out of hospitals and the ability to avoid being in ERs and all of this context for the request that really gave us a much broader and richer appreciation of the project. Now we knew going in that this was a project that we were interested in, and so all of these additional details weren't kind of make or break details, but it really gave us a sense of the richness of the project, a sense of the richness of the perspective that this organization takes, that they really understand the community, they really understand the people that they serve, and that really helped us to have a greater appreciation for the work. And so we appreciate that additional kind of detail much more than other like material stuff. And I would say that, you know, even with projects that we've supported before, so there's some organizations who our foundation has supported every year that we're in operation, and barring something really strange happening, we'll probably continue to support them. But we still appreciate that level of detail from those kinds of organizations, not necessarily on their background because we get that, but certainly about present day and, you know, what they're seeing now, how they're interacting with government funders, how they're interacting with other nonprofits in the community. We really enjoy having those kinds of conversations with those organizations.
And just kind of picking up on that is that we fund the same organizations for years and have that kind of history that, okay, then again, unless something odd has happened, you're going to continue to get support. But, you know, let us know what happened since you got that last grant. We received the grant report, but, you know, let us know what the changes are. Maybe there have been some changes in the community that you're working with, or that, you know, government funding was cut in half since we received the last grant from you. So our need is going to be more. Can you either help us find some other funders for that, or will you be able to step up your give? Because a lot of times, like when we changed our focus to education, that meant that we pulled money from human services, arts, and civic programming. Then we had another funder in our area that just went straight education, nothing else. So again, so now that's 2 funders out of 4 who are focusing on education. So now you have these other organizations that are going, okay, now where are we going to get our money from? And so we try to be able to help with that. I'm not an agenda person. I kind of come with some questions that I've gotten from reading your application, and I want to be able to go through that. But again, tell me what's going on, and then I'll say, okay, well, I do have some questions and kind of like to discuss, but I'm more of a free-flowing, because when you say something, I automatically think of questions. And that's just kind of how my brain works, and it drives people crazy sometimes, because if you say something, I always can come back with a question. And so that's kind of how a lot of my site visits go. Say, oh, okay, well, how come, you know? And so to just kind of be able to go with that, and then that helps me kind of get to the depth of what I need through the site visit. I know LaTida was writing notes, and I was like, I have no paper, pencil, anything. And yeah, if you give me a lot of extra materials, it's probably just going to go sit somewhere, because I've got tons of stuff. And so if you hand me a whole bunch of stuff, it might just sit in my briefcase, to be honest.
Great. I have an easy one, I think. Hello, everyone. Alex Peters, Berea Children's Home. How important is it to you to get reports on time and relative to the outcomes that we said we were going to have done? And I say that only in a sense that how important is that if you're wanting to get future funding?
To me, it's important to try to get your report on your past grant before you ask for the next one. So I usually put the report date due as the point if you're going to ask again the next year, so that have them come in together so I can sit there and look at it. And so, yeah, to me, it's pretty important that I have one so I can have that when I'm assessing the next.
Yeah, it's surprising to me sometimes when we don't get reports, because it's usually a relatively simple thing to do, and especially for, like, you know, thousands of dollars, you would think that, you know, completing a form is not that difficult. But I also understand that you're doing a lot of those for a lot of funders, and they're all different, so I get that can be complex. But yeah, it is important to us, and usually we won't make a subsequent grant if we don't have a report on the previous one.
The same at O'Neill. All previous grants must be reported on. We need to receive that final logic model, and it needs to be accepted by the foundation before we can move on to a new LOI. And we are married to making sure that the grantees fulfill their 1-year grant term. We're not able to look at requests prior to that 1-year term. But if you do close out a grant earlier and you finish up a IT install or a project that takes less time, feel free to go ahead and get that off your books and submit that report. But we're not going to be able to look at that next grant until that initial term had expired.
We excuse me, we ask for a 6-month and a 1-year follow-up, and we track it, and we send out letters gently reminding you, hey, isn't it time for that 6-month follow-up? This is no criticism, but it is surprising how many people don't get them in on time. And it's not that I sit there and go, they were a month late or they were 6 weeks late, but it's actually made me question, what is the value of these reports, and is there something better or different that we need to be doing to communicate how things are going with a grant versus asking for a narrative report? Because to me, at times it seems like, the poor development director ED says, okay, I'm going to stay an extra hour tonight and get this thing out the door. So I want it to be meaningful information and be helpful to me. So I've actually been thinking about, what does all this mean and how do maybe we do this better? And I don't know the answer to it. So if you guys have any suggestions for me, call me or email me, because it's something that it's important for us to know how the grant is going. Yes, we definitely want to know that the funds of our previous grant have been expended, but I don't want it to just be a formality that no one really thinks about, or they pull out last year's and change the number and the amount and the date, and it gets sent. So it's an area that I think I'd like to think more about, and how can it be more helpful to me and to you.
And if you need more time, please let us know. Don't just not send it,
Yeah.
because the program officers and the grants managers don't bite, and will gladly do no-cost extensions for you.
And we do present that information to our board. Like, we present to them composites of the outcomes of the grants that we have made. And we use that information to inform how we think about our grant making in subsequent years. So it's not just a matter of checking a box in our system that we got the report that you owed us. We really do look for that as part of the information about how effective our grant making is. And so it's really valuable as that kind of a resource to us.
And we use it too when we do our profile sheets that go to our board. It says results of last year's grant, and it'll have the information. So if we don't have it, then that looks kind of bad if we had got a grant the year before and we don't have the information to put there. So.
Hello everyone, how you all doing? My name is Ephraim Abdullah. I speak from our organization CCO, which is Concerned Citizens Organized Against Lead. I am based from the East Cleveland community as the educational coordinator, working with the city's coalition they have there. We have a need for healthy homes and environments. Who would you all recommend I begin opening a relationship with on your staff of that area?
So what is your need again? For
We
funding
have-
or for?
Well, funding will probably be the last of what we're coming from, because to put a Band-Aid on something is never the answer. So what it entails a lot of dynamics based on what the conditions of the homes are in the city, and educating those in the homes so that we can prevent from the elements that are causing the different downgrade of our city.
So one of St. Luke's Foundation's transformational initiatives, one of the long-term projects that we have on our docket right now, is around lead poison prevention, and we've done work with CCO before. And so I could definitely put you in contact with the folks who run that program if you wanted to find out more information about some of the initiatives that they're doing and how you might tap into that.
Cheers. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Hi, Marcella Brown. I'm with the Consortium of African American Organizations. I just wanted to ask about competition, or for lack of a better word, between organizations that have similar programs. How much does that play into whether proposals are funded? For example, if you go to, several site visits over the course of a funding cycle and find that several organizations have similar programs, you have to make a decision as to which ones you'll fund. Do you try and encourage collaborations, or does that, kind of make or break whether or not some organizations will be funded?
First thing I would ask is, have they talked? Are they working in the same area? Maybe it's a geographic difference, and so the why, the gentleman that just said he's in East Cleveland, and so if somebody's in Westlake, then they're not going to be able to work together because their geographic is different, even though they may have the same program or same type of program. But yeah, we always look for people to try to collaborate. That's where you want to start, just because there are so many organizations that need funding, and there's only so much funds to go around. So if collaboration would work, then yeah, we would say that would be a good place to start.
Yeah, and competition is really real because we all have finite resources. Even though this year our foundation, through community grants, will distribute about $4 million and make about 100 grants, that still means we still received, 4 times those number of requests. And so there are projects that we're just not able to support. And so we do look for duplication of service. So we won't always fund multiple organizations that are doing the same thing, but it just varies and depends on the kind of project. So we're a health funder, and so we fund all of the primary healthcare safety net organizations. So the free clinics and the federally qualified health centers, we fund all of those because it's a strong match with our mission, and they're, funding multiple organizations to do similar work is just a match for us. When it comes to hunger, for instance, we don't fund a slew of providers that are doing food stuff, even though we value that work and think that it's of primary importance. We may just fund, in that instance, the Cleveland Food Bank. And so it's really just a matter of mission fit and getting a sense of where your organization fits in the priorities of a foundation's mission, I believe.
I think that would come into play if it's a new service that your organization is looking to offer. If someone else in town is doing that successfully and well and has been doing that for years, then yes, we may push back a little bit or suggest that you at least explore and have a conversation with X agency who is an expert locally or in town for doing that work. But it's always part of the conversation. That's why we're there to flesh that out with you at the site visit.
I believe that in these difficult economic times, we've always valued collaboration, but at this point, it's something that has to happen. And I would say to all of you in the room that I have been really impressed with the way that the nonprofit community has really come together and started conversations amongst each other, some even leading to some significant integrations and or even mergers, because it's you that know what needs to happen. It's you that looks out into the landscape over the next 2 years and says, we know the money's not going to be there. We know the resources are scarce. And we know that those are very difficult conversations to begin and then to ultimately go through and make those decisions. So I think many of you are already doing that. For those that are in a space where there are, if you will, people that are doing very similar things, we, as part of our conversations, try to understand what is it that you do that is so significant and different, or a niche that no one else is doing. And if you really can't answer that question to our satisfaction, that absolutely will enter in our decision as to whether or not to fund you. Because we are focused on empowering people to become self-sufficient, there are certain areas, like LaTida said, they are really very experienced and know the healthcare field. There's certain fields that we know very well that we fund very significantly. So as you're sitting down and talking to us about you have to realize that we know the other people in the field, and that we really want to understand why you feel your process or your program or your service or this is unique, or why there's not a need for you to be sitting down at a table talking with this partner agency or this other person. And if you have a good answer to that, that's fine. But if you don't, it starts to raise questions in people's minds. So I don't want you to think that the foundations think everybody needs to merge and that's the answer to the problems. It's not. But I really believe that if what we want is to have the provision of the service be the first and foremost primary concern of everyone, and not the, if you will, sustainability of the entity. It's the sustainability of the service. And having that mindset on, and when we ask questions, we can see if that's really where you're coming from. And for those where it's sustainability of the entity, that's a problem for us, because no disrespect to the entity or to the organization that you represent, but we really care most about those people being served, and we're less concerned about the formality of the entity and how that happens. So if we can help you figure out how to strengthen you, or to strengthen you in collaboration with other people, that's what we're here to do, because we want the services sustained, and we want the people that are getting services to continue, and even more people to be able to do it. And with scarce resources, that's a real hard solution. You know, it's really hard to make that happen in today's environment. So again, I think many of you are moving in that direction, and there are some opportunities out there that I still don't feel have been captured. But I think many of you have done some incredible things, and there's been organizations come together that I really applaud what I've seen happening.
Any final questions from anyone? Okay. I just want to say a little bit about the Foundation Center. If you're thinking of a question, by the way, you can keep thinking about it, and I'll do my little bit here. But just want to say, over at the Foundation Center in the Hanna Building, top floor, Suite 1600, we have a lot of resources related to site visits and finding information about working with foundations. We have a number of books that we published, one called After the Grants, a new book that we just came out with about working with grant makers after the grant has been received and being a good recipient. That's over there. You can check it out. You can use it there. We also have a number of books published by the Council on Foundations that are published for grant makers that I always find particularly useful for learning what a grant maker is likely to ask you. There are a number of books that actually are used kind of as textbooks for new program officers that are particularly useful in teaching them how to ask those kind of questions, and you can learn what those secret questions are just by reading those books. You can also come over and take our class, How to Approach a Foundation. That's a free class that we offer that doesn't talk about writing the grant proposal. It talks about working to build a relationship with the foundation, from the initial call through keeping that relationship going while the grant is out and on their desk, to doing it afterwards and making sure that you're connected to them. We have a full day class on cultivating grant maker relationships as well. So come on over and find out about the resources that we have. If you've not seen this before, we can show you where those are and point to you the secret books, just as long as you don't steal them. You're good. Does anybody have any final questions or anything that they would like to ask the panel? All right. Panelists, do you have any final tips, suggestions, answers to questions that weren't asked that you'd like to?
I would say, if we do call you for a site visit, if your LOI is going to move forward in our process, please call us back. Our calendar fills up rather quickly. This cycle alone will be looking at doing an estimated 48 or so site visits in a matter of 3 or 4 weeks between 3 staff members. That fills up pretty quickly. The sooner you call us back and get that on the calendar, the better slot you're going to get for a time frame. And also, that means probably more time you'll have to actually work on your proposal should it be invited.
I would just add that we talked a lot about bad site visits and about the things not to do on site visits, but I would say, and I think Deborah said this earlier, that I have also been on a lot of phenomenal site visits, many of which included folks who are in this room. And in my role, I'm very much a generalist, so in one day I may be talking with folks about homelessness and hunger and workforce development and healthcare, all in the same day. And and my background isn't really in any of those things. And so, so much of what I've learned about our nonprofit community and how it works is through conversations with organizations like yours. And so, they haven't all been bad. I just want to make sure that I say that, and that for us, it's really a great opportunity to learn. And I hope that you also see it as an opportunity to educate us about what's going on in your organizations and with the people that you serve.
And I'm going to say, just be yourselves. Don't come in thinking that you have to impress us with, some great PowerPoint or I usually just want to have a conversation. I want to know what's going on. And if you take up the whole hour with a PowerPoint or then I'm not getting to ask my questions. I'm not getting to find out what your passion is. I'm watching TV, but you could have sent me the video and I could have maybe watched it on my own and then had that information. So just we want to make sure that it's usually an hour for me is used wisely, and talk to me. That's the best thing to do.
And I guess what I would say is that, you know, even though we're the people sitting on one side of the table with the checkbook and you're the one on the other side of the table wanting us to pull out that checkbook and write some numbers on it, I want to say to you, this really is an equal partnership. So when we're at a site visit, you know, and maybe a trustee or myself or someone else makes a statement that isn't really completely true or maybe somewhat ill-informed, don't be afraid to push back a little bit and say, well, I don't know that I exactly agree with that, and here's why. I mean, those are the conversations that again, we learn, and it can be done respectfully. So, you know, don't be afraid to do that and to have a really good back and forth, give and take, honest conversation. And again, you're always teaching us and helping us. But again, we don't know everything, and we may say something that is incorrect, and if it is, let me know that and say, you know what, Deborah, you don't know what you're talking about. So here's the real thing. But, you know, I know you do it in a nicer way. So that's okay. And I appreciate that when that happens, because sometimes it's like, oh, well, help me understand what is. And you would go through and tell it. And it's like, I really appreciate that. I really appreciate knowing that a perspective I have was not maybe as deep as it needed to be. So don't be afraid to push back.
And I used to be on the asking side of the table, so I try to make sure that people have a comfort level, because I remember going into some site visits and not being comfortable. And so I've always tried to make sure that there's a comfort level there, that I'm just another person, just talk to me. And
Right.
because to me, just because we have the money doesn't mean, again, as Deborah said, that we know everything. And just come prepared to talk about what you need and what you're doing for the community.